Here is chapter one of the new book that I just came up with. Let me know what y'all think. This book is called Beast of the Ozarks, Book 1, First Kill. It was a cool Ozark mountain night. Marcy was walking in the woods outside of the small town of Arnett in McDonald County, Missouri. She enjoyed walking the nature trails in that area. Marcy was a 27-year-old, finely built, blonde headed woman. She married her high school sweetheart after graduation. Her parents were against it. Johnny was a troublemaker, always in and out of trouble. After 5 years of him in and out of jail, sleeping with multiple women, and the drugs, Marcy was at her wits' end with him. The night she was about to present him with divorce papers, she got a call that she knew would come one day. Johnny was in a police chase. They raided his friend's house. Johnny was there cooking meth, and when the police broke in the door, Johnny jumped through a window and jumped into a police car. He took a sharp, winding road too fast and launched off the cliffside and crashed 120 feet below. There was no saving him. The moon was full and it made the changing leaves look like a majestic realm. Marcy loved to walk in the woods at night. It always brought her peace and joy. She enjoyed it even more this time of year. The earthly and plant smells stimulated her senses. She had done this for many years to escape the hell that she lived in with Johnny. She stopped in an opening of the forest canopy that allowed the moonlight to shine in. It looked like the good Lord was shining his light down on her. She closed her eyes and took in the smells and sounds of the nightly forest. The magical moment was interrupted by a sound of something large breathing heavily. She shot her eyes open and looked to her left, where the heavy breathing was coming from. The hairs on her head and her arms began to stand on end, and she felt a tremble building up within her. Her heart began to beat hard and fast. Fear had gripped her, and she could not explain how. She knew that there was something in the shadows that was pure evil. She strained to look in the shadows, and all of a sudden, red eyes started to look back at her. She screamed and began to run back to her car. She could hear this thing running parallel next to her. She began to cry and was praying that she could escape this evil that was chasing her. She tripped over a root that was sticking out of the ground and slid on her face on the dirt-covered forest floor. With shaking hands, she looked around for the monster. Her face and body was covered in dirt and blood. Not seeing anything, she got back to her feet and froze in fear. There before her, about 40 yards away, was the creature. Crying and with trembling lips, she raised her hands out in front of her, and she continually said, "No, please, no." The beast took a step forward, and she quickly turned and ran in the other direction. As she was rounding a bend, she was blindsided by something with such force that it knocked her off her feet and sent her flying 20 feet. She hit a tree with such force that she initially felt her ribs snap. The momentum sent her spinning around the tree and flung her down the steep incline. She tumbled down the incline, bouncing off of trees and rocks. She landed wedged between some boulders, and she lost consciousness. Warm, wet blood slowly made its way down her face and dripped upon the boulders that she was wedged in. After an unknown amount of time, she groggily woke, and she instantly screamed out in pain. Quickly, she recalled what just happened. She frantically tried to look around, but with all the broken bones and the fact that she was wedged between some boulders, she was unable to. Ignoring the pain, she frantically tried to get herself free. No matter how hard she tried, she was unable to free herself. All of a sudden, she heard what sounded like an evil, growling laugh come from behind her. Fear consumed her, and she tried to see what was making that noise. No matter how strong her will was, she could not move. She could hear and feel the heavy footsteps as the thing began to walk back and forth behind her. She began to cry and continued to free herself. The boulders that held her captive began to become sticky from all the blood that had covered its surface and started to dry. All of a sudden, she felt a massive hand grab her by the back of the neck. She screamed and flung her hands, trying to fight off her attacker. The hand pulled her free from her rocky prison and threw her. She went 10 feet before hitting the ground and rolling into a creek. She lifted her head from the cold spring-fed creek and gasped for air. She looked around, and she could not see the beast. Every breath and movement caused pain to shoot through her body. She slowly crawled out of the tiny creek. Her loss of blood and wet clothes caused her to shiver from being cold. Her whole body was shaking, and her wet hair kept falling in her eyes. She was constantly moving it away. She tried with all of her might to slowly crawl away. She made her way down the slope. She could not hear the creature, so she was praying that she would be safe. She had a feeling that if she could make it home, then she would be safe. She did not know exactly where she was, but she had a good idea. If she was correct, there should be a farmhouse over the next ridge. Every so often, she would look over her shoulder to see if the creature was coming. She could not see anything, so she kept crawling. She could feel herself growing weak. Looking around, she noticed an overhang to her left. She decided to make her way over to the overhang. It took her some time to crawl to it, and once she reached it, she realized it went further back than she had known. This brought some much-needed comfort to her. She crawled to the back of the overhang. The coldness of the rock and the earth helped her to soothe the pain that riddled her body. She tried to stay awake, but the lack of energy took over and she passed out. During her sleep, the creature was sniffing the air. It had caught her scent, and it started to follow it. Its hunger and rage consumed it. All that was on its mind was hunger and hate for these stupid, small, two-legged things. The meat had a sweetness to it. It is a softer meat, and it enjoyed the taste. It followed the scent to a small creek where a pool of blood mixed with water lay on the edge. It raised its head and sniffed the air. The scent was strong here, and headed to the left. It looked back to the ground and noticed blood drops. It followed the blood trail. The thing's scent and the scent of the blood caused its hunger to grow. It has been feeding on these creatures for a while. It had fed upon some of these creatures that it found laying on the ground with something sharp sticking out of their arms. It did not like the strange smell of these ones, and the meat tasted bad. The flavor was nasty, and it made it feel different and sick. The thing that stuck out of its arm was sharp and caused it to feel strange if it poked its skin. After trying to eat 2 of these, it was decided that they were not good as a food source. It found a large male one a few months back that was in a tree. Its skin was bright, and it could find these types easily. They are dangerous, though, for they had a big stick that called upon the thunder, and when it struck, it caused pain. It learned to hunt these male ones with caution. Never attack from the front. Always pounce on them or come from behind. The meat of these types was so delicious, and that's what it liked. The smaller of these creatures was its favorite. They were easy to hunt, and although they did not provide much meat, they tasted the best. It did learn that once in a while they bled a lot, which made them easier to track. The one it was following now, it had decided that it wanted to play with it before eating it. It was trying a new method of tenderizing the meat before eating it. If this made the meat taste better, then this would be how it hunted these things from now on. It did not plan on it getting away, but that was no matter. It would feed before the big yellow and orange ball rose high in the sky. Its mouth started to water, and drool fell from its lips as the smell of the creature got stronger, and the thought of a tasty meal to come. It noticed that the smell of the creature came from under this rock, and the blood trail went there as well. It got down on all fours and smiled as it saw its prey sleeping under the large rock. It slowly tried to reach in and snatch its prey, but it was far to the back and was out of reach. It roared out in anger, and its prey woke, startled, and screamed at it. Marcy was awoken suddenly as an ear-piercing roar rang. She quickly opened her eyes to see the monster at the entrance of the overhang reaching out for her. She screamed out in horror and desperately tried to crawl deeper into the overhang. Saliva rained down from its sharp and blackened teeth. Fear gripped her tightly, and she could see no way out of her situation. Looking out past the beast, she could see a barn off in the distance. It was far, and in her condition, she did not know how long it would take for her to reach it. But she knew she had to if she was to survive this ordeal. The beast's clawed hand frantically tried to reach for her, and she was only about 3 feet from it. It growled and roared as it tried to grab her and drag her to the ground. She noticed that all the noise that this thing was making caused the farmer to turn their lights on. The farmer's house lit up, and she could barely make out figures standing in the light. They were smaller than ants. She had to make it to them. She did not know how, but she felt that there would be safety and salvation if she could. The beast quit reaching for her. It snarled and let out a deep vibrating growl and quickly left. Part of her was telling her to run for the farm. The other part of her begged her to stay in the safety of the overhang. She could not decide on what she should do. She knew she was safe in the overhang for now, but it would be only a matter of time before the beast could figure out how to get in, and if it did, she would have nowhere to go. The beast would get her, and she would die. At the same time, she knew it was out there and could not help but wonder if it was trying to lure her out of her safety of the overhang so it could grab her. She needed to come up with a plan, and fast. She heard it roar again, and it sounded like it was far away. She waited a while before she heard it again. It was even further away. Satisfied with the idea that it was leaving, she decided to try and make her way to safety of the farm. She crawled out of the overhang and slowly got to her feet. The rest helped in the fact that she was able to walk again, and until she got to her feet, the pain was mostly gone. Getting up changed that fact, but she knew she had to push through the pain and escape the woods. With each painful step, she made her way down the mountainside. When she reached the bottom, she realized that she had covered a great distance, and the farmers were closer. She desperately tried to scream out, but the sound just would not come. Her mouth was dry, and it was painful to make any sound come from her vocal cords. She pushed on. She judged that she only had around a half a mile to reach the safety of the humans, and she was determined to make it. The woods were still deathly silent, and this made her very uneasy. Without hesitation, she began to make her way to the farm. Constantly looking at her surroundings to make sure the beast was not there, she continued. When she was about a quarter mile from the farm, she felt a massive hand grab the back of her neck. It picked her up off the ground, and her feet kicked back and forth as she desperately tried to free herself from death's grip. It turned her around, and her eyes grew large as it was smiling at her. The beast opened its massive mouth to reveal several rows of sharp, drool-dripping, blackened teeth. Its breath smelt of death and decay. She knew that she was about to die, and there was nothing that she could do about it. She let out a blood-curdling scream that was cut short as the teeth bit down deep into her head, killing her. Peter Overton and his wife Samantha Overton were suddenly woken by a loud noise. It sounded like a roar. It was unlike any roar they had ever heard before. Quickly, they got out of bed and put their slippers on. Peter ran downstairs and grabbed his Remington 7mm mag from the gun rack and raced out the back door. Samantha followed behind him and turned the outside lights on their way out the back door. Peter was standing in the yard, slowly taking in the darkness. He heard a woman scream out in the distance, and they both jumped. They both looked in the direction of the scream and tried to pierce the darkness of the early morning. They could see nothing, and this bothered Peter. After a while of searching and not seeing anything, they almost gave up and went inside when Samantha caught a glimpse of something at the tree line. She pointed it out, and they both tried to as hard as they could to see what it was. It looked like a woman. Then all of a sudden it disappeared, and seconds later they heard the terrifying scream, and it was cut short. Samantha ran inside and picked up the phone. She pressed 2 on the speed dial, and seconds later a female voice could be heard. McDonald County Sheriff's Department, how may I direct your call? Samantha, scared, talked fast. Thank God, Jeanette, is that you? Jeanette was surprised by the voice. Samantha, yeah, it's me. What is wrong, girl? Relieved, Samantha began to speak. Jeanette, is my brother there right now? It's an emergency. I think a woman has been murdered out on our property. Samantha told her all that had happened, and Jeanette could hear the fear in Samantha's voice and knew she was not making this up. After Samantha finished telling her what happened, Jeanette told her to get Peter inside and lock the doors. She would get the sheriff and have the on call deputy come right over. After they hung up, Jeanette picked up the mic to the radio. Dispatch to 211. Come in, 211. The radio was silent for a moment before there was a response. This is 211. Send it, the voice replied. 211. Please respond to the Overton Farm. They called with a possible 187. I'll be contacting the sheriff and have him meet you out there, instructed Jeanette. Roger, dispatch. Show me en route to the Overton Farm, said the voice. After she finished dispatching 211, she picked up the cell phone and called Mark Benson, Sheriff, McDonald County, Missouri.